Deborah, both of us have run plenty of workshops. You've run far more than I have, however, but we've both had experience of online workshops. Where do we start? This is quite a difficult one, actually, and we've discussed this in detail. Where do you start when you're looking at running a team workshop online?
Okay. Well, I feel very strongly that you start in the same place as you should start when you are working with people face to face, which is, what's the purpose? What are the objectives? What is the reason for this workshop even happening? And it's useful for you to know that in advance of the session, and then for you to be able to repeat it when you're at the session, because we want to look at how we work together. Doesn't really cut it. You want to know what the purpose is. Why do people need to work better together? To achieve something, to do something, whatever.
No, perfect. And we need to do that. We're not just waltzing in. Everybody wants us to feel better. There needs to be a purpose. There needs to be an objective. And everybody needs to know what that is. How do you tend to elicit those objectives, Deborah?
I was going to say, there's lots of different ways of doing this. And some of it is with a telephone or Skype or whatever call, but conversation. And I find that quite often to help, little plug here, but we have some wonderful cards which actually are sort of conversation starter cards for working with teams. Okay. And so, Jo, I don't know if people can quite see those.
No, you can't see them, but people can get the gist, I think.
The idea. That's it. That's really good. So you can choose all sorts of different things. You know, why are you doing this? What are you? I have to get close enough to read that. What does the team want or need to achieve? That's sometimes just the most basic of questions, isn't it? We'll get those conversations started. Yeah. So it's really about also whether you're deciding that you're, not you're deciding, but whether it's with the manager of the team or the leader of the team, or ideally you're getting input from everyone realistically. And I've just for today to talk about the most common way of things running, and that is that we're asked by a particular person, so usually that director or manager of the team, and so that we would get the initial briefing from them.
Perfect, thank you. I think timing's something that people do ask a lot about, is how long should an online virtual workshop take? And I know you're just going to...
Okay.
Well, how long, Deborah?
Jo knows I feel quite strongly about, strongly about it in that I don't think there's an absolute. No. I know that we are told, and certainly, you know, I've tried to keep them a little shorter, let's say, workshops, and we are told now, typically people get fed up with being on Zoom meetings or whatever, and so keep it to, say, 90 minutes or something. I'm actually going to disagree. Sometimes that's what it should be, but other times, and I found particularly when I'm working with a real team, we've got people working together, then actually a half day, 3 hours or something is fine, as long as people have plenty of gaps and they have time to reflect, and it's really varied. You know, there's some breakout teams, there's doing exercises one-to-one, whatever. So I don't think there's a really nice answer to that, Jo, but actually we did just to speak about this beforehand, and I said that I thought that perhaps the most useful thing, as I say, is that we'll talk about some of the different aspects that might come in, but then in terms of the examples that we might give, we will relate that to a team workshop with a genuine team.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I know we've put all of our accreditation now online. So we looked at the feedback and we're saying, right, we'll just do it short sessions in the morning because people are getting Zoom fatigue and everything. But the feedback was really varied, wasn't it? Some people were saying, well, actually, could we have done it in a whole day? And oh, crikey, you know, we're trying. It really depends. And other people like, this is amazing. Thank you for making it short because my energy levels were able to maintain that for longer. But it really depends on the individual, doesn't it, as to how long. So it's all, again, back to the objectives with that. Now, time, size of team. Now, I'm going to get quite passionate about this. What do you think about the ideal size for a team workshop would be, Deborah?
Okay, well, I'll say formally, because we know that the best size for a team is in fact like 4 or 6 people. So that would be great. I'm going to be realistic here. That rarely is what we're asked to do. So I actually was looking back at what the sort of average is really. And it's tended to be a team, and some of those people work really closely together, some not, but of about 10, maybe 12 people. So a workshop that's about that number.
Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I think because it's online, people say, oh, could so-and-so join? Could so-and-so join?
Yeah.
And because you're not physically in a venue where you need to ensure that there's enough physical chairs and tables and everything else, and you're not having to pay extra, for lunch and all of those elements. I think it's easy to say, yes, bring them on in to the team. And before you know it, the amount of attendees you've got is not manageable. And you need to ensure that everybody within the team has got something, a contribution to make. So you need to keep it small. Ideally, like you said, maybe up to 12 would be a maximum. I would say, because I ran an online workshop, it was only an hour and a half, but it was for 17 people. And the key element was that I knew everybody anyway. I knew because I'd already run a face-to-face workshop 6 months previous. So that was okay. But if they're all strangers and it was my first experience, that may have been a little bit too many. So perhaps to split them into 2 separate workshops would have been beneficial.
That would be sensible. And we also know the things that we're talking about can be relevant for when you're running a session, which is in fact for, as we quite often get asked, there's 30 people. We're a number of different teams, but essentially we're all part of the same function. And so it's not to say, I think it is harder to do those large numbers online. It becomes a different dynamic. And then definitely I would keep it to a much shorter timing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when you've got the larger numbers, you're talking more about a presentation, aren't you, there, with a bit of interaction, as opposed to something you're really getting your teeth into. This has been interesting, getting some people saying 12 is their limit, and that to keep everybody engaged. I think that's familiar, very familiar there. And we've been doing our workshops by our own vertical team structure, and all been between 3 to 4 hours.
Great.
I think, again, this is it varies, doesn't it? There isn't a standard, but I think we all get used to 8 to 12 people. Perfect. Oh, that's an interesting one. Kate said 9 on Teams, as you can see them on the screen, and 9 is the maximum that you can see. That's top tip there from Kate. Thank you very much. Okay.
Just to say, that is a really important point, that if you are running a team workshop, whichever with Zoom, you can have more people. So I wasn't stopping to think about that, but it is absolutely essential that you can see everyone. Now, some of the time the technology is going to go, or someone's not got the bandwidth, and so you have only got their voice, but officially it's that you could be able to see all those people.
Okay, fabulous. So we talked about you still need to get the objective. Perhaps you have to be a bit more conscious about timing. You have to be a bit more conscious about the amount of people in. You also need to know what tech you're going to use. This isn't a tech webinar. There are 1,000,001 webinars out there which you can choose from, which will tell you all about different platforms. But just make sure, I tend to be led by the client. Whatever the client uses, I come and join. I don't know about you, Deborah. I don't insist on a particular platform.
I don't, but I'm not very good technically, so I'm much more comfortable with the things I know well. But no, we have to go with what clients want there. And actually, someone I've noticed has said about having someone else work with them. I absolutely couldn't agree more. That I think having either that there's 2 of you officially doing it, or someone who is there in the background, or that you've got a backup, all of those things are really, really vital. In a way that they're not when it's face-to-face.
Yeah. And I don't know, again, a lot of people haven't done their workshops yet, and I will just share very briefly that before the first 2 workshops and also one of these webinars, I'd never done one before. I did not sleep the night before. I got really anxious, and I gave myself a really good speaking to, because it wasn't that I didn't know the subject. It was because I was worried about the tech. And sometimes the tech, get scared about the tech, that can get in the way of your delivery. But you know what you're doing. Don't worry about the tech. As long as you've done enough research beforehand, you know what platform you're using, how the functionality works, you have somebody to back you up. it will be okay. I had a power cut on my very, very first meeting. That's all I'll say. And I was at home. I had no technical department, but we were okay. We managed. It did work, and we all smiled at the end of it. So there really is no standard, but make sure you know your tech, I'd say. Oh, and the other thing, top tip, the other day I was on WebEx, Zoom and Teams, all within a space of a morning actually, and for some reason my headphones defaulted to a different headphone setting in between Teams and WebEx. And I didn't know that. I made the assumption that everything was fine. So always check your settings when you go onto a different platform. But anyway, we don't need to get into the tech. I've just said that and then I've gone into it. I do apologise. Okay. So using Belbin, Deborah, how do you use Belbin to position?
Okay, well, I would say that you're going to get people to complete the reports. That's absolutely vital. I mean, what's the point of doing
Is it a Belbin
workshop? Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So you would have each individual completing their self-perception, and really important to get observer assessments from other people that they're working with, and whether you choose 360 or team or the peer review, that whatever, we're not going to go into that there, but to say get observers. The issue is, because that is always done in advance. Now the question then is whether you give those out in advance, whether you email people their reports in advance of your workshop, or whether you wait until the workshop.
Okay. Oh, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a difficult one because normally you'd come prepared with them. I mean, what would you do if it wasn't online? You'd be...
Oh, I definitely give them during the workshop.
Okay.
Now, my preference, even for remote, and again, you know, we have to keep prefacing it with it depends on. It depends on how long you've got and the whole setup. But I still prefer, where possible, to give them out during the session when the session is long enough, and then leave people 20 minutes to have a coffee and to go through when they have understood what the reports are about. However, I have found that with a number of clients, because they're worried about people actually receiving things during a session, that they feel safer getting it in advance. So I have emailed those reports to individuals in advance.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just going to say that really important here. If you do that, you need some context, because if these are people that don't know anything about Belbin, you want to have explained a little to them in advance. So there are some links, really. I think you've got something.
Sorry. So I missed my prompt. That was terrible. I'm so sorry. Share screen. Here we go. Share. Okay, so this is our website. So what, Deborah, you're saying is that if you give out a report without any context, people perhaps won't read it properly. They won't quite understand the why they're doing it. So if you go to belbin.com, resources, session ideas and handouts. Which one were we talking about? Team roles in a nutshell.
That's always a good one.
Okay, so we can click on that. That will bring up a PDF. You can save that, or you can just copy and paste the link. So you just copy and paste here, right click, copy, paste, and put that in an email. And say, if you want to know a bit more about the context of Belbin Team Roles, use this.
Exactly. You might choose to put the FAQs in there as well.
These ones here?
Yep. Probably the best for you to have a look and decide which things, but as the core, I would go for Belbin Team Roles in a nutshell. And the first one, which is the team role summary descriptions, are really, that's the most important, but people will have those on their reports.
Okay, so
anyway,
we don't need to.
So they've already got that,
okay.
But if you think it would be useful to send it additionally, of course you can.
Okay. Other things you can send as well alongside is a little clip of Belbin, if you wanted, but it's going to have to be short, isn't it? Because we find that people's attention spans aren't so much that they're going to do a lot. So if you go to resources and video library, all of these you can download from YouTube as well, but this is quite a nice one, which is it coming up now? Perfect. A guide to Belbin Team Roles. That's just 2 minutes. It's an overview of Belbin, which is quite useful. And I was looking on here earlier, and we also have a how to complete your Belbin. So if you were wanting somebody to have some instruction before they even completed their self-perception, you can download it all here and use those links.
I'm going to cut in there because I think that whilst all of that is very useful, it's rather important, I think, that people are not fully briefed on team roles, unless they know them already, before completing their self-perception, because you get a more clean, often a more open and honest self-perception result if it's not that someone understands in great detail the team roles, because without meaning to, people think, oh, you know, well, that was the team role that I am sure I am or I want to be, and they just answer sometimes unintentionally, but in that way. So this information is to send out when you are sending the team report, the individual reports to that person.
Okay, perfect. These two send out potentially with the instructions if you wanted to, but the others, yeah, make sure that they are with the actual report itself. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. There we are. I just realised I've got some really old photos of me on the website. I needed that to go away. My goodness. Okay, so they're the supporting material that you can give. You can just copy and paste these. This works beautifully. Okay, so if you are giving the reports out beforehand, what do you want them to look at? If they are reading them before there, what pink bits do they concentrate on?
You may or may not do this, but you might then say to people, look, with this report, and you can just have this in your email,
here we go, we've got a report here.
Note that whilst it is not anonymous, so your observers are not anonymous, but it's non-attributable. And so the thing to look at, if you go to the first main page of the report, Jo.
This one here?
This is Jo's report.
So it's Jo Pink. It's nothing to do with me at all, actually, I think you'll
find. This is one where, you know, lots of clarity, but you're not going into great detail. That what you're wanting to do is say, look at those team roles, understand which ones they were that have come up. What's the pattern? Have you got some things that have come up really high, other things low as here? Or is it that it's flat? Just making sure that people understand there's no right and wrong. It can be any pattern. And then onto the page that has got, because these are things that in the workshop, I think you should explain in more detail.
Yes.
So really, you're wanting people to look, particularly if they've got getting this just for themselves, to look at the page of looking at themselves and the others, because I think the graphs are quite easy to look at here. If you just next one on, Jo, thank you. Yes, comparing self and others. It's zipping about a bit.
Sorry, delay. Sorry.
That's the one. Thank you. So here you can see whether if the two lines look similar, you know, say get people to see whether those lines are similar or different. So are people seeing themselves in the same way as others have seen them? Okay. And then I think that's a really important one. And another one that I think if people don't know much about roles so far, of course they read the whole thing and you want them to understand that, but the last page, the very last page,
that one,
is called work styles. And sometimes people have said, oh, I'm not sure I'm that or that role. When they look at this, very often people start to see, because we've got the combinations of their top 4 team roles. So, you know, never mind which the team roles are called or whatever, but does that fit? So for instance, you know, controlling, do I like to take overall responsibility for ensuring that objectives or collective goals are met?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. it's just helping. And if people are not agreeing with that, I just say to them, make notes alongside all of this and then bring it to the workshop.
Brilliant. Thank you, Deborah. So you want people to reflect, that they need to find areas that resonate or don't resonate. So they're bringing something to the workshop. They've looked at it before they attend. So there's nothing worse than people going, where is it? I've not looked at that before. And then you lose people right at the very beginning because they suddenly realise they should have done something. So give them some ideas there. Okay. So have we started the session yet? No, we haven't. We need to start the session. Now, when I start them face-to-face, I tend to use Cooperate. For those of you who know Belbin Cooperate, I might get them to rescue a rocket from the moon. I might get them to do some team right. I might get them to share some pieces to be able to put some pictures together on Team Build, that's what it's called. And the idea is that you're trying to get people to appreciate difference. You're trying to get people to understand that they're all behaving differently, and that you want to be able to harness those differences. And that's the point of the team. You're kind of setting it up a little bit. Now, Deborah, what sessions do you like to use? Right, and this is what people are after, actually. What activities work well online? We're now coming to this. Don't worry, don't worry. What would you say is good as an icebreaker from a Belbin?
Well, it entirely depends on whether what you want is to have that high energy, there's a fun side to this, and connecting, or whether, and quite a lot of the workshops that I run, people do want to interact and have maybe some fun, but actually they want to know that there's a serious side to this first of all. And it depends on whether people know one another or not. So something that I quite like to do, for instance, if we're working with this nominal team of 10 and they know one another reasonably well, then one of the things that I quite like them to do is to say, what we're going to be talking about, all about perception, your self-perception, the perception other people have of you. What can you tell us that might change the perception that your colleagues or the people here have of you? And you can, and then give a few examples. Of course, it can be something from way back in your past when you were at school, you whatever, were in the drama group, and that would surprise people now. Maybe it's something you're doing currently, you know, in the lockdown, you've taken up cake decorating or whatever it is, or maybe it's something in the future. I'm intending to do a bungee jump for my favorite charity. Doesn't matter, but just sharing something. So in a way, it's the things that would surprise. And when people say, we know one another so well, yeah, but they can usually come up with something. And so there's usually some enjoyment there. You'll find themes coming along, but it's also showing the some aspect of people. So they're sharing. Something else which maybe is showing up is allowing people, again, this is sort of speaking it through, but saying, if I'm describing myself, the two, I think, most positive things about my personality, my behavior, what I do are these, and one not so positive thing, shall we say, and people are often quite honest about that, so that's quite good. And if you want to do something that's more physical, then I'm sure there's lots of versions of this, but the one that I quite like is, okay, within movement of where you are, go and find something that you have that's in, especially if it's in your home, and that you think is representative of you, or has, you know, it's like, what might this say about me? What can I share? And then you'll get all sorts of things. You know, I might say, well, this mug, because this was, say, you know, a photograph, it's actually the photograph that was at Meredith's 90th, whatever. But, you know, I might say something about that. So people, again, are sharing, but you've also then, if you're wanting a bit of physical movement, we've got some other things, but I think we'll talk about those in relation to actual team roles in a moment or two.
Perfect, thank you. I think at this point we need to remember that we need to look about the rules of engagement and what is the etiquette when we're doing this, because it could be, I had the joy of running a session for 150 people on Teams and couldn't see anybody's faces. That was joyful. You know, what do we do when we can't see people's faces? What do we do if, you know, the bandwidth doesn't allow us to do that? Can we adapt these exercises to do that? We'd have to use the chat. I think chat for me has been a real eye-openers. If you get people involved in the chat as soon as possible, then that is a wonderful way of getting people to be involved, even though you can't see them. Yeah. Would you say so, Deborah?
No, completely. And there is some, you can also use some other approaches. I was talking to one of our lovely clients just a couple of weeks ago, who was saying that what they were doing right at the outset was getting people involved by using a cloud. It's like, how are you feeling? I mean, I do an interpretation of how you're feeling, but it was that a few words, and then they logged that and it came up as a cloud, a word cloud.
Wonderful.
So
yes.
To take almost the temperature or the feeling of how people are. And I noticed someone mentioned psychological safety. We're not going into that in great detail here. It's important, but we've not got the time to do that. But I think it is at this point, you know, the start, that you just check on whether people are going to be comfortable sharing, and it is quite useful to then take the temperature, as it were, are people anxious or pleased or whatever.
No, absolutely. And yes, absolutely. You can use things like bingo you can use the whiteboards on Zoom.
Yes.
Polls are wonderful. I mean, I think they're really easy. I love them, actually, although my typos sometimes are quite amusing. But you can use all of these things. You can also use lots of quizzes. So there's lots of apps for that, which you can share your screen and show that. And we'll put a link to those in the email that goes up. There's a couple of websites that have all of them listed, which will do that, which is really useful. So we've got that. We're trying to get people engaged, but what do you know as the facilitator before you do that? Because I know I love this, because people can't see what you've got in front of you, can they? Nobody can see the notes and the mess, in my case, of what I have. I personally, Deborah, have the team report in front of me at this point.
Always. In fact, I'm going to say that, sorry, skipping back and forth, but in advance, I'm saying that you would have given everyone else their individual reports, but I've just made an assumption, perhaps I shouldn't. As the facilitator, it's really important that you have read each of those individual reports in some detail. And I would say the team report is really helpful, because you can then transpose all the bits of information from the individual onto that team report. And actually, Joe, thank you. The first page of the team report, where we've got everyone's names. Now, this team report is your friend. You use this to help you think about, given the mix of people here, how might I have set up my workshop anyway? If you've got lots of monitor evaluators, I mean, this team, there's quite a mix, but if you had a team where, for instance, you did have lots of people who want to reflect, who might take some time and not want to rush things, but want to have the real information, then you know that you're going to start by explaining things in a rather different way to, well, I've got loads of resource investigators and they're not going to sit still, so we better make sure that we're doing something where they're physically going up and getting something straight away. So use this to help you think about what is likely to be the style that people would respond to. And then on this, I mark, for instance, if I find that there's been someone who has a big difference between self and the way others see them, I will have put lovely coloured notes all over this or whatever, but I can see at a glance. And when the person in the corner then says, well, this isn't making sense to me, my self-perception makes no sense to me at all, you look and you see that they have got, I won't go into the technicalities, but that maybe they've not been as forthright as they might have been on their self-perception, but there's something will have shown on the individual report. You'll have this on your notes. So yes, it's just a really, really useful page. And as we flip through, maybe, Joe, what you've got here, I love this page. This is showing the people, the average, that red line is the average amount of that team role in the team. But actually the average doesn't count for much. What really is important is whether you have at least one person who is a strong example, a really positive example of type. Now this team is actually quite nicely balanced, but we're a little bit lower on the plant. And it's not that we've just got one person who is high the plant. So I could feel myself being in danger of specialist hat on and going into too much detail on this. Could you just flip on, Joe, to the page which then shows us the average? So this is the red line in colour. And what you can see here is this team is probably not going to be right out there. You know, we've got people who are completer finishers. They're people who it's really important to get things right, conscientious, going to be concerned to make sure that every little detail is correct. And combined with that teamwork, a very adaptable, excellent listener, wanting to help and support. So that's going to be very different to some other teams. So we've already got a little bit of a feel for what this might be about in terms of this team.
Yeah, I really like the words as well, actually, Deborah. Again, It's there to help inform when you're actually putting the online workshop together, and you know, use it, because you don't have. I was having such a conversation about this with Nigel Belbin this morning, actually. And virtual and online workshops are great, but you don't have the level of interpersonal relationship or skills, body language that you would normally. So if you know the people, you know their behaviours, it's really going to help you be more effective when you are working remotely. I can't stress that enough, actually. So use those team reports to make sure that it's informed how you're going to run the session. That you know the one who's here, who's sitting back, who's really not interested. Actually, they probably are really interested. It's just that you know that they're a strong monitor evaluator. You know that they're going to need a little bit more time to think things through. So you understand and use your knowledge of Belbin to ensure that everybody contributes well. Okay, so we have icebreakers. I've had an icebreaker. I have asked everybody to bring pens and bits of paper with them. And because right at the very beginning, I was a bit, I don't know if this tech is going to work. So let me find a bit of paper here. Yeah, this is blank. I got everybody to spend 2 minutes creating their own thumbs up sign. So instead of people go, I can't find it on chat, I'd say, right, everybody, give me a thumbs up sign. And it could just be as simple as somebody drawing a tick. And so we'd spend some time doing that. We'd put them up, and some people would actually use those throughout the session. It felt a bit more personal. It was easier for some people just to go like that. And again, you see different personalities, different behaviours coming in as well. Some of the more creative ones, demanded a little bit more explanation than perhaps that's more shaper, isn't it? Done, right, yes, next, tick. So that's another idea of doing it. Okay, so we're starting the team session. We've had some ideas of icebreakers. We need to get into some more idea about the team itself. I suppose it goes in the same way as a normal team session. You talk about the theory, you go through all of those things, yeah?
Yeah, completely.
It's the same.
And actually, I do agree with you, of course, that you're not getting the sort of body language. It is easier for people to disengage.
Yes.
That is true. But, I have found that very often people are really sort of there and wanting to discuss things and are very open as long as things are in short bursts.
Yeah. So it's just keeping it short.
Absolutely. But essentially, I'm following the same kind of format as I would for most workshops, which is, as Jo said, there's the sort of theory, not great detail of the theory, but the emphasis on what on earth is a team role. This is behavioral. It's not personality. It's what do I do, not who I am. That's a vital thing to get over.
Yeah.
And then finding your own way to go through the 9 team roles. I mean, I tend to use the film. We have a film called Fire Toast and Teamwork, which gives a little bit at the beginning that's got little jumping things that explain the roles. But, you can use slides, you can talk about them, whatever you're going to do. But to have gone through those 9 roles and then think about the 3 categories, and those 3 categories being the ones behind Jo. So social or people, if you prefer, it's the relationship roles, and then the action, the task roles, and the thinking or the cerebral roles. Oh, be a weather woman.
I know.
So it's those categories, and you get people to think about. Now, they probably have already worked this out from the handouts, but I find that I'll sometimes get people just to jot down for themselves what they think the 3 roles are that would go into each of these 3 categories. People can think in 3s. Very few people can remember 9 things that they're not already familiar with, but they can usually grasp it more in 3s. So that's quite useful to go through. And then I would actually show a sample report. So you could use the one that Jo was just showing, or we've got one on the web. Oh, that's one on the website, isn't it? I think
it might be.
Anyway, but use a sample and talk that through. So those of you who are accredited know how much you can go into that. But what you're wanting to do is just to make sure people have then understood. So even if they've already had the report in advance and they've looked at the pages you've said and so on, I then would just spend a few moments going through page by page, and they've got their report in front of them. If you have
Perfect.
not yet given out the reports, then as you go through those, you don't give them their report until afterwards. I have to say, is my preferred way of doing it.
Yeah, and you can do this really easily. It's not like, oh my goodness, if you've got the full interplay system, you just press the button that says email to all individuals, job done. You've got everything set up before. That will send everything out easily and include that link to the how to be the strong example of type. Or if you haven't got interplace, you can have all of those emails already prepared so that you just press send with the attachment on there for everybody. So there's a little bit of prep beforehand, but you can do it really easily through that. One thing I would say, Deborah, is when I've been running some of these workshops, I've always had to check whether or not people want to be able to speak freely or whether or not they physically have to come off mute.
Yes, I
And
agree.
I find with the smaller teams, I like them to keep off mute because sometimes they say something quite spontaneously. And if they then, everybody's going, can't hear you. And then they've got to find the mute button. I do find that time goes, that, the moment's lost. So I personally prefer, if it's a small team, to keep everybody as you would around a table. People don't sit there. You want to have that freedom, but it's something you have to agree up front. And again, it depends on numbers.
Yes, it depends on numbers, and that's what you would have discussed in the initial stages. I agree, it's vital.
Yeah.
What I would do, so let's say people haven't had their reports, they've just received them. If you've got a long enough session, that's when it's a coffee break or whatever.
Yes.
Go and have a cup of tea, go and read your report, come back, and then a nice exercise there, because the thing people want to do once they've got their report is talk about it. Even if people have had their report in advance, because they now hopefully understand quite a lot more about team roles and about some aspects of their report, I still think this holds up. I would put, depending on numbers of course, but assuming our team of 10 or 12, I would put breakout rooms of 2 people per room.
Okay.
And then I would time this really very carefully, and I use it as a real listening exercise. So you have 2 people, person A, person B. Person A talks about their report for 2 minutes, particularly the things that we are that they're surprised by or upset by or delighted by, that sort of thing, anything that's on their mind. So they then discuss that for 2 minutes, and then you send out a little note or put your voice over, whatever you want to do, but send a note to the breakout rooms saying, okay, now you can have 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever you've got. For person B, who has only been listening, person B has not been allowed to speak when person A is speaking. And it's really a hard exercise for most people. But then person B can ask questions, no names mentioned, ask questions or suggest things, and there's a bit more of a discussion. And then you put out the note, okay, swap over please. And
Okay.
it's a nice exercise. People come back having felt they've talked about it, and it saves you time, because unless someone has something burning to say to the whole team, then we don't need to repeat that.
Perfect. So you use breakout rooms, you get them in 2s. You don't decide who those 2s are unless... No, let's keep this simple, Deborah. We haven't got long left.
Okay.
So you keep the people, they put them in 2s and they discuss and they share. And that gets that burning, I need to talk about me, or I need to, hear about you and discuss that. That's fantastic.
Yes.
So that's a good way of getting the reports together, of people to understand the reports. The other thing that we do offline, which we can't do online, is that we have exercises that help demonstrate those 9 particular team roles, don't we? And I know we've got a few here that I think would be really useful to go through. Before I do, actually, I'm just going to answer a few questions. Yes, always include the reports going back with a tea or coffee break for 15 minutes. Get them to stand up, exercise, or what have you. Absolutely, 5 toes and teamwork somebody else has used. A timed program in advance so they see they're not tied to the screen for 2 to 3 hours. Yeah, that's a nice one, Adrian. I like that. Thank you very much. Perfect. Right, so what other exercises would you have that really demonstrates the 9 different behaviours?
Right, well, there's one that I really love. There's 2 different sorts of things that we're going to do here. We probably would do both, because we would get people to plots their names on, as Joe has just done, and we might do that with a whiteboard, or we might use the post-its. Actually, I've been just using, I haven't actually got a flip chart stand at home, but I've managed to adapt my clothes era, and I put the Belbin circle on top. I shouldn't have said that, should I? But then people call out their team roles, and then we put them on. You've already got that on the team report, so you've already seen it. But the important thing is that people are sharing themselves. It's not that we are showing their colleagues what's there straight away. They're sharing. So plotting out in exactly this way, top roles, bottom roles, look at the pattern that we've got there. Something else that you might want to do, is I'm conscious of time here, so I'm thinking that something else that is a version of what we do otherwise is, okay, have your report in front of you. Everyone stand up. We're all up here.
Do I have to stand up? I'll stand up. Here, I'll be on your course. I haven't got my jeans or my pajamas on. We are lucky. Right, okay.
So then you say, okay, sit down if your top role, for instance, is completer finisher. Sit down if your bottom role is shaper. Sit down if, and you get the idea. So you're going through, and you quite often, I mean, the really top tip here is you do this in advance and check and see what you've got a lot of and not, to make it more fun. But you'll often end up with people who therefore nominally might seem to have a lot of similarities, but there's real differences, and that gets a bit of movement.
Oh, I like that one, because actually what you'll find is that people who may have the same similar top roles actually are different when you look at the bottom roles, where the third and fourth roles come in, and we're showing that we are all a wonderful mix of these 9 behaviours. We are not a insert team role here. We're this wonderful mix, and that we are all all of this makes us wonderful, unique individuals. Perfect.
And I completely agree, Shoshana, that getting people to change their name on Zoom to their top 2 or 3 roles is a lovely thing to do. And that is another way of sharing it. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. If you don't know how you do that, because somebody had to show me how to do that, on your screen, you have 3 little dots. This is in Zoom. You press that and it just says rename. I've just done mine without anybody noticing. It is really easy to do that. I'm playing my shaper role now, definitely. Now, this I think is lovely. One thing I would say is don't be afraid. Use a flip chart. I know it's not techie, but it works really well. And actually, what I'm finding and the feedback we're getting is that people like that human touch. So please don't be frightened to use a flip chart, whether or not you're drawing boats on it or whatever with the old team sort of behaviour slide, and do use the team circle. It works so well. And then what you can do is put people into breakout teams, can't you, Deborah? If you're not doing as a whole, if you've got lots of people involved, put them into breakout rooms. And I have here, let me just share, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, which page is it? It's that one. We have this, and it's just a JPEG of this. We can send this to you. You can put this, I use Miro, M-I-R-O, board, which allows people to see something at the same time and comment upon it. There are other things you can do, but you can pre-prepare different Miro boards. The link will be in the email. And you can get people to go off into their breakout rooms and spend time doing it themselves online and then report back. It's how you would do normally.
That's a lovely thing to do. And in terms of the reporting back, what you will have set them is, okay, as a team, this mini team, what are your strengths? What are the weaknesses of this team? For fun, we sometimes suggest come up with a nickname for this team as well. And then if we're taking it to that next stage of an exercise, you can either have quite a fun exercise, or I like to always be serious. You can have an exercise which actually relates to the work. So something along the lines of, there's one which in fact I think resource investigator like I had taken from someone else and just slightly adapted. But you give people, let's say you've got 2,000 copies of an old Yellow Pages or something, you know, and you've got to work out what to do with them.
Sorry, if you aren't in the UK, that's an old phone book.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. But actually what I'll often do is make it much more about them. So for example, as a team, how might you think about rebranding yourself, or how might you think about marketing yourself to the rest of the organization or externally? And there's some really great things. People come up with suggestions and so on. So these are in their breakout teams still. Then they come together and they can have decided if just one person is going to do this or in turns, but they will present to the rest of the group or the larger team. And some really interesting things come out of that. And then at the end, you can have a vote on it, which of the ideas were best, or just say, we want to do all of those, can't you, Joe? I mean, I think, sorry, I don't stop for breath sometimes. I'm going to come to the most important thing on all of this is, what does it look like in terms of the ideas they're coming up with, are their actions, the way that they are as a team, they're plotting it, however they're doing it. Well, yeah, and so what? What is the purpose of this team, or what are its objectives, or what are the current goals? And the mix that you've got there of the different team role types, is that going to support what you're trying to achieve? And if not, what are you going to do about it? So it's those real actions coming out of things.
So, I mean, really, what we're talking about here is the fact that this is a team workshop. Team workshops that you would be running anyway, face to face. We just need to ensure that you can do these online, and it's, I think, easier than you think it is. The tech is there. I'm going to quickly share, before we sum up completely, another exercise.
Doing that, Joe, I'm so sorry, cutting in while you were doing that, while you're getting the thing to show. I was just going to say, I almost think it's like, don't de-skill yourself as a facilitator. Just remember what it is that you're good at and you do anyway. And, yes, some adapting is needed, but in fact, I think that there's less changes needed. And when we try and make too many changes, we lose the core.
Well said, Deborah, absolutely. I'm just going to show you one other thing is that I have done recently. Rather than the team circle, I've adapted the team contributions page. Now, why is this useful? It's useful because you can just have it on a Google Doc. There's all this whizzy stuff, but Google Documents have been there for quite some time, and you can set up a document per team, per breakout, or if you've just got one team, they can all contribute to this exercise in real time on this actual page and then feed it back as needed. So all you're doing here is getting everybody to look on page 4 of their reports, looking at their percentile scores, putting their names in the right columns, and it's then just saying, where are the gaps, where are the overlaps? What sort of strategy are you going to have to ensure that everybody's using their strengths when needed? So again, it's looking at the team circle, but this is something that can just be put onto a Google document. It's really easy to use, and you can, I will put a link to that, I think, or I'll just attach it. I will attach it to an email that goes out. I'll stop sharing there. Okay, Jonathan, yes, I will make sure that there is stuff there. Absolutely. And of course, don't forget about the opposites. You can have a call out, you can have a shout out with opposites. Thank you very much, Julia. It really works quite well. Do you know, there is so much that you can do online. We've covered a few bits. We've been pretty flat out, actually. I'm surprised Deborah's free and has got a voice. But I think the key thing is that Belbin is there to help people understand that everybody is different and everybody has got something meaningful to bring to the team. And that team isn't there just for a bit of fun. It's there because it's got an objective, it's got a meaning. You are there to help facilitate every single person within that team to be able to hit the end objective. When you're doing it online, there's a bit more prep is needed. Get familiar with the tech, but most of the exercises can be adapted. The team circle can be used on a flip chart or a clothes dryer and it will work fine. Or there are things like Miro boards that you can use. Google Docs is there. Make sure as a facilitator you understand everybody quite well within the team so that you can adapt what you're doing. So if you do have a team of high completer finishers specialists, you're not going to be all pom-poms and raving around. You're going to give them time to be able to understand and get something from it. I lost my completely. Be real, actually. My top tip would be real. On the first few of these, I tried to be awfully professional, and it didn't quite work. If you mess up, say you've messed up. Other top tip, tell people what you're doing as you're doing it. If you're going to be sharing your screen, tell them you're going to share your screen. That's another useful one to have. But what we're going to have is we've got other exercises we will share with you on the link. You'll get all of that tomorrow. I won't have time to do it this afternoon. I've got other things. I've got another workshop to do. Deborah, how else would you like? If anybody was to take a top tip.
Oh gosh, no, I mean,
Oh, that's put you on there.
You did, yes.
I'm so sorry.
Covered most of those things. I stress going back to using the team report, and then on a broader note, I would just say ending your workshop on something really positive and bringing the team together. And my personal favorite is just to say to people, what's the very best thing about this team or your colleagues or whatever, and they can hold that up, or they can use the whiteboards, or they can use word clouds, whatever, but just pulling that together. And then really key thing, you knowing that there will be follow-up, that you want to then look at these.
It's all in the follow-up, isn't it? So make sure it doesn't, your session doesn't end when you click the end session for all button. It really doesn't. Make sure that you follow up, and it's the following up with things that they may have promised that they were doing, actions that were agreed to be taken. Make sure everybody has that. I think that's it for now, Deborah. I think that's all we have time for. Yeah, again, I think we might have a second session on this, because there's also, I want some people I want to talk to who've got some really good ideas, and I'll go, oh, that's nice. So perhaps we ought to get some more people involved in the discussion next time. But thank you.
We've got so many more ideas too. You know, we can only share a few. Yeah.
So thank you so much, everybody, for taking part. Everything will be with you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And for those of you who are yet to do your online workshops, don't worry. You know your stuff. You're going to be fab. Thank you very much. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.